Welcome back to Families in Action right here on KHTS AM 1220. Today we are talking about interventions. And Cary, a small percentage of drug and alcohol interventions will fail because one or more of the families or friends or family members that are present will become intimidated by the addict's emotionally charged reaction. A professional intervention specialist will know what actions to take in order to get the proceedings back on the right track so that the addict will be motivated towards treatment. This speaks to families not trying to do it themselves.
It does. It speaks to, families, it's not a good idea to do it by yourself. It's really a good idea to have a professional there for a lot of reasons. Number one, for guidance, and number two, for commitment. If you're going that far, you're committed to it. And number two, almost all interventions that do fail, is because the people involved in the intervention did not follow through with their commitments and what they said. If you don't go into treatment, I'm leaving, and then they stay.
Right.
If you don't go into treatment, I won't call your work anymore, and cover up, and then they call. So it's those kind of things where if you don't go into treatment for a 20-year-old, you can't live in my house and shoot heroin in your room anymore, and the kid leaves. And 3 days later calls up and says, look, I'm not going to treatment, but I will come home and I'll stay sober. And then they give in.
Yeah.
When if they didn't give in, another day, that kid would have went to treatment.
Now, you've seen this. I mean, you've actually seen this happen. I've seen it happen.
The deal is, let's pick the 20-year-old. I was in a meeting one time. I was actually sitting in my office listening to the counselor next door from me that worked for me, fighting with this kid and the parents. I mean, it wasn't them fighting, not the counselor. And I finally walked in. I said, what's the deal? And the counselor looked at me and says, she won't go to treatment. But she did say, he won't go to treatment. But he did say, Mom, the only way I'm going is if you throw me out. So I looked at the mom and I said, throw him out. He said he'd go to treatment. She says, I can't do that. And then the other counselor says, you see what I'm dealing with? I said to the lady, and her name was Diane, I'll say Diane. I said, Diane, what your son just said is if you throw him out, he will go to treatment. She said, I can't throw him out. I said, you're not throwing him out, he's going to treatment. She says, I can't do that. Anyways, he died 3 days later from a drug overdose. And then I get so many parents saying to me, well, if I throw him out, they'll use more drugs. Chances are they won't have the money to use more drugs, and they'll use less. And they will get willing because people get tired of, especially people that are using drugs, of people couch surfing. They don't have any money, so they go from couch to couch. Most of the addicts smoke cigarettes. How much is a pack of cigarettes? Like $5 or $6 a pack now?
I don't know.
If your kid's not working and he's bumming cigarettes, that gets old fast. So if you're going to do an intervention, either a formal or informal intervention where you sit down and with your husband or with mom and dad and say, look, you can't live in here anymore unless you go to treatment. Kid says, the heck with that, and leaves, and calls you 3 days later and tries to make a deal with you, don't deal. If you go to treatment, when you go to treatment, we're coming back in your life. If you stand to your guns, 99% of these people go to treatment because they got nothing else to do. They run out of game. You are their game.
Now, this is interesting. It says approximately 90% of both mothers and fathers reported that they felt that their child's drug or alcohol addiction problem was their fault. So there's a tremendous amount of emotion in here.
I'll tell you, there's a few pieces of that. Number one, if you want to take blame for it, take blame for loving your kid. That's probably what you can take blame for. Once they're using, and you're allowing it to continue, when you could do something about it, like do interventions and stuff like that, that's on you. I'll tell you what, if I have 3 kids and they don't use drugs and never did, I mean, maybe a hiccup here and there, but I'll tell you what, they wouldn't have dreamt it because we wouldn't have had it. And besides that, their kids had made other decisions. But we can't allow our kids to use drugs in our house. Think about that for a second.
Oh my goodness.
If I throw them out, I just said this a minute ago, if I throw them out, they'll use more. That's not true.
No.
I've seen so many kids overdose and have major issues from where? Right at home. Right at home. Enabling kills.
Oh, yeah.
You know? And we do it because we're thinking is the right thing to do. We want to help, and we don't want our kids to hurt, and we're scared. And what really gets in the way of most parents doing what they have to do, I hate to say it, is we don't want our kids to be mad at us. So we don't do what we need to do.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty sad stuff.
Now, this is interesting, Cary. Over 50% of the addicts and alcoholics that have been intervened upon within the last decade were reported to have been in complete denial about their addiction.
Well, they might say they're in denial about their addiction, but I'll tell you what, I've been treating people for over 30 years, and just about all of them, when it comes time for them to go to bed at night and they turn out the lights, they know. They know. They might not want to admit it, but they know.
And this, what you just said, is important for our listeners to understand. This is the difference between the family sitting down, thinking they know enough to do this, and having somebody come in from the outside, an intervention specialist like yourself, who's been down this road with so many people. You know.
Well, see, let's put it to you this way. Pick an adolescent for a second. It is impossible for a 15-year-old boy or girl to use drugs, fail school, fight with mom and dad, and be happy. Impossible. Now, they can fake it. When they're with their buddies, they can look like they're having a great time, but at the end of the day, when they turn out the lights, they're scared. And they're miserable. It is also impossible for a 40 or 50 or 60 or 30-year-old to have problems at home with husband, wife, kids, work, drink, and all that kinds of stuff, and really be happy. At the end of the day, they're pretty miserable and lonely and scared too. But people cover it up real well.
They do. I'll never forget a lady who once told me, she said, my adult son lives in our basement, and all he does is smoke marijuana all day long and sleep. That's all he does.
Now, that guy's got to have great self-esteem.
I said, wow. And I just, there was somebody else listening, and they looked at her and they said, you're enabling your son. And she said, well, what am I going to do? He has no place to go.
There's places called rehab. They can go there.
Yeah.
But, people are invested in keeping their kids sick, and that parent can allow him to stay there till he's 83. And he'll go nowhere in life but the basement.
And the housing that the state provides under the freeways, people generally don't like having to stay there.
They don't. And as we said earlier, couch surfing gets old. People get tired of that.
Yeah.
They don't like people bumming food and cigarettes and dope and everything else.
Now, this is interesting. Approximately 90% of all drug and alcohol interventions will succeed upon the conclusion of the meeting when an intervention specialist is leading the process. And of course, that would be because the intervention specialist understands how to get through the process.
Well, I've done hundreds and hundreds of them, as you know, some on TV, and some just in general, and everyone went to treatment. Everyone. There was one lady, took 3 weeks. But she called me every day, cussing me out.
Oh, really?
And I would wait for the call, and finally she called me one day, and she said, okay, I'm ready. And she went to treatment. That was like 6 or 7 years ago, and she's still sober. It was a really bona fide alcoholic. So if you do an intervention, if you do it from love, if you have the right people there and the right interventionist, and you follow through with your commitments, almost always success.
Because it would seem to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but because of the high emotions that are running, it would be very easy for the response of the person being intervened, the addict,
Right.
to get angry and upset,
Right.
and send that anger and upsetness directly to certain members of the family or their
Always,
friends.
yes.
And then that person who's getting that anger from them, it would be easy for them to fold under pressure.
But that's why when an interventionist is involved, they look at all that. They look at, first of all, the players in the room. If having you there is going to escalate the situation to almost violence or craziness, you're not coming. They'll suggest you don't. If what you're going to say is going to escalate the situation, they'll make sure you don't say it. They'll look at where the intervention's being done. So, sometimes doing an intervention in somebody's bedroom is not good because it's their comfort zone. So
And you've invaded it.
And you've invaded it, and it's their property, a get out of here kind of thing. So when you're doing an intervention, you got to look at everything: who's there, what they're going to say? Is it going to make it more explosive? Is it the right place to do it? So there's a whole lot of things that come in check. Also, I've got a lot of people that do interventions without interventions, and then they call me and say, okay, we did intervention, he's ready to get help. It's like, whoa, wait a second. Now you got to look at where this person can go. Does he have the right insurance to go to treatment? Are there money? Are there county beds? You know what I'm saying? So you really want to plan all that first. So there's a lot that goes into an intervention before it actually is done.
This is also interesting, Cary. Only about 7% of families will make the decision to move forward in allowing a professional intervention specialist to conduct this often delicate process, because addicts are famous for being masters of manipulating their loved ones without a professional being present. Family and friends will be much more prone to acquiesce to the addict, who once again promises that they will stop using on their own.
And maybe even mean it when they say it. I mean, an alcoholic or an addict or somebody, let's pick even cigarettes, or somebody that drinks too much Diet Coke, I'm going to quit tomorrow. And they really mean it. Problem is, tomorrow comes and they can't.
Hey, you gave that stuff up.
I did. I gave up all of it.
Yeah,
I haven't had any alcohol or drugs in 35 years, and I haven't had a cigarette in 28, and I haven't had a Diet Coke in over a year.
Now, here's something
You know what was the hardest? That Diet Coke, boy.
Diet Coke.
Oh, my
Oh,
goodness.
my goodness. I have to admit to drinking an occasional Dr. Pepper.
Do you really?
I do.
Oh, my. You're one of the major reasons I don't drink soda.
I know
You
that.
said
I heard
something
that.
to me that made sense.
Now I just said the wrong thing to you. You're going to go back to drinking Diet Coke. Don't do that.
No, it's Dr.
You'll
Pepper.
put that on my heart.
It's Dr. Pepper.
The latest trend in alcohol interventions are commonly referred to as brief interventions,
Right.
generally aimed to help an alcoholic to begin to drink less.
You know, that rarely works.
Really?
Rarely works, because if you're an alcoholic and somebody says, I'll tell you what, today I only want you to drink 2 drinks instead
wow.
of 6. And the alcoholic will sit down and say, wow, I can do that. Finally, somebody gets it. I need to drink less.
Great.
By the time they start drinking that second drink, they're already a little bit buzzed, and now what goes through their head? One more won't hurt. So,
Yeah, right.
So
What's the big deal?
that kind of bargaining doesn't work, and if it does, it's short term. It's a short term lifespan. You know, it'll work for a day or two, and eventually they're gonna do it. If you're really an alcoholic, if you really have an addictive personality, once you pick up that drink and take that first sip, it's off to the races.
Absolutely.
With all good intentions.
And listen to this. Over 40% of the adult population in the United States have reported to have at least one addict among their immediate family members. Now, this translates to well over 75 million people throughout this country. There's a lot of people needing to have interventions.
You guys think you're immune to this?
Whoa.
You think your family members are immune to this? I don't know. It doesn't sound like it.
Not much.
I don't think anyone's immune to it. In fact, I don't know anyone. And maybe, hey, if you're listening to this show, if you know if you don't know anyone that's ever been affected by alcohol or drugs, please call in. I don't know anyone that doesn't know somebody affected by alcohol or drugs. I don't know anybody.
Well, I don't know that I do. Well, listen to this. Only 1 of 10 families that consider using a professional interventionalist will actually follow through with conducting the meeting.
They get scared off.
They get scared.
They shy off.
We're talking to the people out there listening right now that think they may need an intervention in their family. Don't be one of this 10, only 1 in 10. Come on.
Why do you think people back off? What do you think the reason is?
A lot of things, but what? I mean, they don't.
Well,
I think a lot of times they want to take such good care of their family member. They want to do the best for them, and they're not absolutely sure that putting them through this is a good idea. I don't know.
Right. If I do that, they'll drink more.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm going to push them over the edge.
I don't want them to hate me. I want them to love me. Or and a lot of times, you know what? We get into that. They get into that rut of, well, I can take care of this person.
Which is why the lady was letting her son smoke marijuana in the basement and do nothing.
Well, imagine this. Her whole world is now centered around that kid smoking marijuana in the basement and taking care of him. Now you pick him up and put him in rehab. What has she got? That's her whole life. That's her self-esteem. That's her self-worth. So we have to check our own selves when it comes to the reasons why we don't do what we might need to do to save somebody. Maybe it's not because of them. Maybe it's on us. It's our insecurities and our fears of, oh my, what now?
But this is the reason that they're doing these on television, I mean, people enjoy watching them, obviously.
It's
for
drama.
all kinds. It's
I know.
drama, right. But the fact of the matter is that they've helped people to understand that there is such a process out there that does work. And you're saying you've done literally hundreds of them, some of them on television, and they do work.
Mm-hmm. They do.
And you're also saying that you're going to do them a whole lot more cheaply than $5,000.
Yeah. But you know what? Every intervention is successful. Think about that for a second. Number one, we're as sick as our secrets. When families start talking, things get better. When we don't have to hide it, that we get rid of that big old pink elephant in the middle of the bedroom or living room, things get better.
Right. I can't bring anybody over to my house because so-and-so may be doing their thing. Yeah.
So the worst, let's say the worst is you do an intervention on somebody and they say, the heck with you, and they leave. All right, so now what? Everybody got to say what they need to say. That person's out hurting themselves, but we at least did what we could to do the best we can, right?
Right.
To help that person. How do you feel guilty about that? You want to feel guilty about doing nothing.
That's right.
Because the longer you watch this happen and watch that person that you care about self-destruct without trying to do something about it, I'd feel guilty about that.
Yes, absolutely. And the need for doing interventions is high, isn't it?
Yes, of course it is. Well, the need to do anything. I mean, if you see somebody that you care about hurting themselves, what are you going to do? Right? I
You're going to sit around and do nothing?
Yeah, you want to do something. If you see somebody, if one of your friends is sitting in the corner pounding his head against the wall until he's bleeding, do you think you might want to stop that? What's the difference about watching somebody drink themselves to death?
And or eventually die.
And, well, how many people die every hour?
Well, every hour there's 3 people that die.
So it's not a fantasy, is it?
No, not at all.
It's not a cartoon, is it?
Not at all.
It's reality, huh?
What I'm going to read next, we've talked about before, and it really leads into something else that we also talk about that. But 50% of all car crashes in the United States are related to individuals who have abused drugs or alcohol, and many of these are attributed to teen drivers.
So let's think this through for a minute. Almost 50,000 lives are lost from just accidental overdose. 50% of car crashes are from alcohol or drugs.
Right.
And we can get into murders if you like, and rapes if you like, and robberies if you'd like,
Yes.
and whatever else you want. And I can almost guarantee you that at least half of all that has some kind of alcohol or drug-related thing, and it's even suicides. So if you really want to put it into perspective, it's a pretty serious crisis we have going on right now.
Which is the reason why we sit here and say that even though we're fairly convinced that the state is going to legalize marijuana, there are extreme reasons why it's not a good idea.
You know, when it comes to kids, too, I was dealing with somebody the other day, and we want to put this kid in residential. Kid's smoking a lot of dope and doing all kinds of other crazy stuff, and the parents don't want to do it. So, sure enough, I figured, well, I already know why. Why would a parent not want to help their kid? Because their parent's using drugs too. And it's exactly what had happened. Finally, the dad said to me, yeah, Mom smokes a lot of weed and she takes prescription pills. Of course, we're challenging all that now. We're trying to help the kid. So now the kid's going to suffer because Mom's embarrassed, or whatever the real reason is. So again, we got to really take a look at ourselves.
Boy, do we ever. Do you want to start talking about the ignition interlock device, or wait till we take a break, or what?
We take a break.
All right.
Are we ready for a break? If we're not ready, yeah, we are. This is Families in Action on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Welcome back to Families in Action on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. I'm Cary Quashen, along with the Silver Fox next to me. Hey, you know what? We always talk about the negatives, right?
Mostly.
So this was on Facebook yesterday, right? And I love this one. It says, I won't mention the name of the person. So on the eve of my birthday, I wanted to take a second to thank all of you who have helped me through this kidney disease. It's never fun and it's always there. Thanks to all the people who have kicked my butt when I needed it and allowed me to fall apart when I needed it. But most of all, I need to thank a man named Cary Quashen. Oh, that was neat. I'm not ashamed to admit I had a drug problem in my teens. Without his help, I would not be here. Thank you from the Bob. Thank you from me and my family. You saved this dumb kid's life. Cheers. Isn't that cool?
Wow. It's very cool.
It sure brought me.
Congratulations.
I get these all the time, so I don't want people to think it's all negative and we just keep losing people, because we actually save a lot of lives.
Absolutely. You know, we just talked about interventions, the fact that you do them, and you've done many of them on television and otherwise. What phone number can they call you at, Cary?
You know what? You can call 661-297-8691. That's 661-297-8691. If you want to call me directly, call me on my cell, 661-713-3006. It's always on it. If I don't answer, leave a message. I'll call you right back.
Now, for anyone that thinks he's kidding, that is his cell phone number.
That is my
his
cell
very
phone
own.
number. Test it out.
Test it out. Give him a call. Give the number one more time.
661-297-8691, or my cell, 661-713-3006.
There you go.
Don't
Cary,
all call at once now.
Now, you know what we need to do? We need to hit on this because this is such a biggie. We talked about it a little bit. We talked about the drunk driving thing. And the state of California, Los Angeles
Didn't
County.
we say 50% of all crashes were because people were drunk?
Absolutely.
We have a solution.
We have a solution.
We could beat that number up completely.
Very completely. And the interesting thing about this is Los Angeles, Tulare County, Sacramento, and a couple of other counties were test zones for this for a bit. But now the state is going to make this a statewide thing for people that have been convicted of driving under the influence. These are called ignition interlock devices, and basically it boils down to a breathalyzer. They attach it to your car. When you get in your car, before you can put the ignition key in the ignition, you have to blow in the breathalyzer. If you are under the influence and over the limit, the car will not start.
And the trick is, you said if you're over the limit.
Correct.
So that means if you're a person that doesn't have a problem with drinking, you go out to dinner, have a glass of champagne, you're not drunk, your car will still start.
Yeah, takes like 3 seconds.
Yeah, if you drank too much, where you're now a danger or threat to yourself and the community, your car won't start.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. I mean, that will keep those drunk drivers off the road. And we know when they did a survey, they found out that, and these are just people that admitted it, that over 4 million people a month in the United States admit to driving under the influence of alcohol, which means you could probably easily add another million and a half on top of that, people that wouldn't admit to it. So that's a lot of drunk drivers out there on the road, and that means a couple of things. One, the driver themselves is in peril of killing themselves on the road, but they're also in peril of killing other people on the road.
Right, and what you said is that will keep the drunk drivers off the road. I'll tell you what, put one in my car tomorrow.
No kidding.
I don't mind blowing in something if I know that everybody else is, and that means that we're killing the drunk driving deal.
Our board operator, Justin, is with us. In fact, he's very much with us. He'd like to see it happen.
You know, I've heard almost every kid that I know, teenager, loves that idea. Mm-hmm. I've had some adults that says, I don't want to do that. It's ridiculous. Why should I have to? Because it might save your life or a family member's life. That's why you have to. For a 3-second, you don't, and it's inconvenient to you. It won't be so inconvenient to you if your kid drives and somebody crashes and kills them because they're drunk.
It's interesting. You know, if you think about driving a vehicle, there are a number of things that we have to do that are inconvenient, but we just take them for granted. One is, who likes to fish around in their pocket for change to put in the parking meter? You have to.
Absolutely.
Either that or you're going to get a ticket and you're going to pay a lot more money than you would in the parking meter. But so there are things like that that are inconvenient about driving a vehicle. You have to park it correctly. Right?
Well,
so
not if you have a Tesla, it'll park itself.
Well, I'm not so sure about that. After seeing some of it may be a little soon to say
maybe,
yes to that one. But
maybe.
The ignition interlock device is not a tough thing. It takes 3 seconds. You puff in it. And the wonderful thing is that if somebody comes out of a bar, they've had too much to drink, they're not going to go anywhere.
You want an inconvenience, go on the internet and look at statistics for drunk driving. Look at the statistics of how many people lost their lives that weren't drunk. that were a victim of drunk driving,
Yeah.
and then tell me it's an inconvenience.
I went to church with a fellow one time, and he was a high school student, and he was a football player, and he was a hero on the football team. He was a great guy, just a great guy, and a great athlete. He was the victim of a drunk driver.
Oh, yeah.
And as a result of that, he had severe brain damage, and he had a really, really tough life because of that. And why? What a senseless waste of a human life. Absolutely senseless.
I remember Mom called me one day, 17-year-old kid, called me to thank Action for helping her kid get a year and a half sober, and to let us know that a drunk driver killed her kid the night before she called me. Happens all the time, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if that whatever interlock deal was in that drunk driver's car, they wouldn't have been able to drive, and that kid would be alive.
That's right. We're talking about real lives here, saving real lives, and the governor of the state and all of our legislatures, we're so thankful for them to bring this into being, because if you're convicted, you're going to be putting a breathalyzer. But you know what? What's the big deal with just preempting, getting everybody to put one in their car?
Anyways, time to end the show, Mike. Thanks for listening. This is Families in Action on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS.